Hi, everybody. Might as well get started. We're just at 2 o'clock now. So before we jump in again, final reminder to please complete the attendance form. There's again, always the digital form that's linked on the screen, and there's also some paper copies at the front. We'll pop this up again at the end if you don't get a chance to capture this now. But again, just please remember to do this at every session so that we can capture your attendance and towards your certificate of program completion at the end of the program. So before we jump into the session, I really would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. So the University Health Network is located on the sacred land of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. And as always, I always encourage you to reflect on the land which you are working, living, or studying on. It's an always great practice to do to acknowledge the land. So welcome to session 2 of the STAR program, where we'll be diving into some different topics on research integrity. We have some colleagues here from the research quality integration team, Christine and Michael, who you'll hear from in just a moment. But before I pass it over to them, I'd like to just welcome Tammy from the cancer education team, who has a cool opportunity to share with all of you.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Tammy, and today I'm here to share a bit about our program at Princess Margaret Cancer Center. So the program is called Cancer 360, and so it's available to all students at UHN over the summer. And as the name suggests, it is a program that's all about cancer. It gives you a very holistic view of cancer. And we've actually just started a program last week, so it runs from June to the first week of August. So it makes it easy for you to participate while you're in the lab and during research because there is 8 interactive e-learning modules, and each of them is paired with a in-person live section. So every Tuesday we have someone who is an expert in the topic, and they will come in during lunch, and then you will get free pizza. So the topic covers like not only just cancer basic, cancer survivorship, there's also music therapy where you get to make a little song with an expert. And then there's also Indigenous cancer care, and there's many other highlights from clinical research and also different perspectives on cancer. So by completing the program, you will get a certificate of completion, and you also have the opportunity to take part in a student conference at the very end. There is a case competition, and you can also have a chance to present your research, whether it's through a poster or a talk. And so also, even though there is free pizza, the real value in the program is really talking to other people, other students and experts in the program across UHN. So there are many students from different disciplines, people who are doing research on different topics and from different universities and different undergraduate levels. So you'll get to connect with a wide audience. So to enroll, you just have to do a very quick create an account at pmcancercampus.ca, or you can also go there through the QR code. You will find the program called Cancer 360 Plus, and then you will use the enrollment code called Summer 2026. And so I just have a little shameless plug of our program. So these are past participants we had, and they had a very positive feedback for our programs. And so a lot of them actually go on to medical and industry roles. So you'll also have a chance to talk to people who have similar career choices in the future. So yeah, so thank you for listening to me. But if you're interested, take a picture of this and then enroll in the course. And I look forward to seeing you guys maybe next week, hopefully.
I'll also include links to all of this in the email that you'll receive after, so no need to scribble anything down. It'll all be shared to you in the email. Thanks again, Tammy. Over to you. No clicker, but it's just I'll just do the laptop.
All right. Hi, everyone. So as Jordan mentioned, we are from the Research Quality Integration team here at UHN. So as part of our portfolio, we handle issues related to research integrity, research misconduct, responsible conduct of research. And those are some of the topics we'll get into here today. So a little background about myself. I completed my master's and PhD at U of T in exercise physiology, and I've been in this role for about 4.5 years now. So it's helped me anyway in that role coming from a lab setting, being able to integrate some of these concepts related to responsible conduct, research integrity, et cetera. So hoping today you guys are able to pull some of those key concepts out and apply it to your everyday work, regardless of the setting that you're working in.
And I'm Christine, so I manage the Research Integrity and Responsible Conduct program. Similarly, I did a master's here at UHN before starting this role, and I've been here for 6.5 years now. Um, just want to also say, like, if you ever have any questions, doesn't need to be kind of a big deal, but you can reach out to us. Our email address is just integrity@uhn.ca, and I'll get Jordan to include that in his follow-up email. So if you ever have any questions about any of the things we're talking about today or anything that you think kind of falls under this umbrella, happy to kind of chat and help you work through things. Okay. So this presentation, we really want to give you an understanding of what research integrity is, why it matters, and how you can kind of apply it to your research that you're doing this summer. We're going to focus on key principles, some common challenges, so things that you might experience in the lab, as well as some best practices, what you should be doing in situations for the responsible conduct of research. We're going to end with a couple little interactive case studies. We're going to show a couple of videos of situations that you may or may not encounter. And we've got a couple of questions. You can kind of talk to your neighbors, figure out what you do, and this has to kind of bring us back to the group. So, should I do something? No. Okay. So what we want to get out of this session today is we want you to be able to understand what research integrity is, kind of explain why it's important, explain how to, kind of apply the principles in your work. We want you to recognize some common issues. So maybe these are things that will come up in your research, maybe they aren't, but being able to know when things are maybe an issue and need to be addressed, some common issues and challenges, being able to apply best practices. So, we'll kind of explain what those best practices are and hopefully give you kind of the tools to use these in your work. And then again, evaluate some real world scenarios with the case studies, and be able to apply these learnings. So first off, I guess, what is research integrity? So sometimes you see the term research integrity, sometimes you see the term responsible conduct of research. It kind of depends on your funder. It depends on the regulatory body. How we kind of think about it is research integrity is really the commitment to intellectual honesty and personal responsibility in research. It's really about kind of that like ownership. And it encompasses the responsible conduct of research, which includes like a number of practices that ensure research is conducted honestly, transparently, and consistently. So we're going to get into kind of what those are here. So why is research integrity important? I mean, you may be able to figure this out for yourself, but it builds trust within the research community and it ensures high quality data, high quality research outputs that can be kind of relied on. And it also builds trust with the public. So when there are issues, sometimes they make it to the media, and that can really kind of have impacts on the public's trust in science, which, I think we all lived through COVID. We kind of know that that can be an issue. It ensures the validity and reliability of research findings. So again, we kind of know there's this reproducibility crisis in science. Things get done and then people can't reproduce them. Things get done, they go down a certain path, and then suddenly like people realize the underlying assumptions are wrong. So if you're really making sure that your research is conducted, rigorously, that will help kind of support that. It protects the reputation of researchers and institutions. I mean, nobody wants to be kind of caught up in one of these things. But again, if there's an issue and you've done everything honestly and you've been transparent, it doesn't need to be a big deal. But if things are kind of not clear, things are murky, things have been done improperly, that can be an issue for both you personally, your PI, the research institution. And it just promotes accountability and continuous learning. So it's not about being perfect and getting everything right all the time. It's really about, knowing what you did, documenting what you did, being honest about that so you can figure out if there are issues, you can figure out where you went wrong, how to fix that. So some key principles, kind of talked about this, but honesty. So, you're making sure you're presenting your data, your results, your methods truthfully without misrepresentation. So you're not fudging numbers so that your results look better. Um, Accuracy, you're ensuring your precision in data collection, analysis, and reporting. So again, you're not being like, well, we don't need to look at those data because I don't like them. You're including everything, you're being honest about what you're doing. You're collecting your data properly, you're making sure you're doing all that. Efficiency. So, if you do things improperly, like you might have to redo them. If issues come up down the line, sometimes this causes way more problems than if they had just been addressed to begin with. Michael's going to talk a little bit about kind of data management and all that, but making sure that we're keeping track of what we're doing and we know what's kind of going on. So if there are issues, you can go back and you can correct them easily. And objectivity. So you want to, really like engage with the data as it is, not as how you want it to be. You want to avoid bias in study design, in data interpretation, and in peer review. Michael, now I think it's you.
So now that we have, like a general understanding of some of those principles related to research integrity, responsible conduct, I'll cover some best practices now. There's probably over a dozen topics that fall under the research integrity umbrella, but we've kind of distilled those down into like 4 topics that we think are most relevant to trainees in your position. So we'll be looking at mentorship and collaboration, data management and integrity. So how you handle that data through the project lifecycle, publication and authorship. That's a big one, especially in your position. Those conversations are often a bit awkward to have with the PI sometimes. And then AI use and research, which we know there's a spotlight on that today. So we'll try to give you guys some useful tips when using that in your research. So with mentorship and collaboration, these relationships that you build in the lab, either with your mentor, so with the PI, with senior personnel like a postdoc or PhD students, or even amongst your peers, they really are the foundation of a lot of these principles of research integrity. So a lot of the issues that we see in our office, we can often trace them back to like poor oversight, poor team dynamics. There's often underlying issues related to something like, oh, this image was improperly produced or this text was plagiarized. As simple as that sounds, there's always, not always, but usually like an underlying issue related to like general lab oversight. So your mentors in the lab are really those who guide your responsible decision making and your skill development and ultimately your career growth. So you often look to those who have already been in your position for a guidance related to how research is conducted responsibly. And in most cases, they do model that responsible research behavior, but as I alluded to, that's not always the case. And it's incumbent on yourselves to adopt and even promote that culture of responsibility in the lab. So when it comes to best practices for really building and fostering these relationships, you want to make sure there's open communication and that dialogue between your peers and mentors is respectful. A big one that we see is a lack of clear expectations related to roles, responsibilities on a project. So oftentimes people are given work to do. They have an expectation for example, how they'll be recognized for that work. And there's a lot of times miscommunication there. And then probably the most important thing is making sure you document your contributions to any aspect of a research project and any decision making that you were involved in. And this really ensures transparency and clarity throughout the process. So some useful tips related to helping establish and maintain these collaborative working relationships. So regular check-ins and having shared documentation with your colleagues in the lab. So things like lab meetings, one-on-one meetings with either the PI or with a senior lab colleague that might be supervising your work. And again, this helps to build that trust and accountability between all members of the lab. Clarity, so setting clear expectations from the onset of a study, recognizing that, things always change. Like every project I ever worked on, it was not in the end what we thought it would be from the very beginning, but there's always that ongoing dialogue of responsibility and who's doing what and who's contributing what. And then, of course, working together. So using collaborative platforms really helps everyone stay on the same page and keep everyone aligned. So now looking at data management and integrity, again, this is a big one for us. So we see a lot of issues related to images, so like biomedical images, Western blots, IF, stuff like that, microscopy. And a lot of this is traced back to just poor data handling, and Christine will touch on this a bit later with some real world examples. So proper handling of those data really help to verify and reproduce and give it a mark of trustworthiness when you're ultimately publishing these figures. And again, when issues come to us, so say we get an issue with a paper, someone notices that a figure panel was duplicated or a Western blot appears to be inappropriately flipped or cropped. We see a lot of that. And oftentimes these can be easily rectified by just providing the raw data. And we can kind of trace it back to like mistakes happen all the time just due to the demands of working in a lab. So really having those data throughout the process from like initial experiment all the way to publication really helps to trace back, okay, there's a problem here. How did that happen? And when you practice good management practices, there's always an opportunity to rectify those issues. So in terms of some best practices related to that, using validated methods and recording your data accurately. This is obviously very helpful from the very beginning. Storage, so we always hear like, oh, we just lost the data, or we don't have the data, or it's on a USB stick, or it's in the cloud somewhere, I can't find it. So really using like institutionally approved systems to store that data really helps. And then data sharing, always following responsible guidelines when sharing data between colleagues, and making sure you're, obtaining consent when required. So some useful practical tips here. File naming. So this is a big one. It's very easy to lose track of files when it's just called like image one or whatever. So try to come up with something simple and unique that will allow you to keep track of different versions of the same file. Backing up. So again, this speaks to oh, we lost the data, we don't have it. So making sure you're using like UHN or UFT approved storage systems. And then keeping track, so detailed log books, lab books, tracking how data were collected, processed, analyzed. It seems like it's a lot, but it's really, really helpful come time when, if and when problems arise in the future. So publication and authorship is our third topic that we think is relevant. And again, I know from my personal experience, this was always like kind of not a touchy subject in the lab, but like something that especially junior students weren't the most comfortable talking about. So you'll be given work to do on a project and you won't really know if that's going to lead to authorship or acknowledgement or really what you're doing the work for. So we really publish for two reasons. One is to advance science, so knowledge sharing and knowledge translation are two of the bigger aspects of authorship. And then we want to get credit for the work, right? Especially as students, you're applying for grants, awards, funding, all of those papers or abstracts or conferences that you can get on, those will help you attain awards and funding for your own personal achievement. And when we appropriately assign authorship, so we'll look at what inappropriate authorship looks like, but when we do it appropriately, we're supporting research integrity really in two ways. So we're crediting you for your intellectual contributions to the work, and we're also designating responsibility for the quality of that work. So a problematic paper comes into us, we're looking at that authorship line, and we're obviously identifying the PI, but we're also looking at, okay, here's this image, look at the author contributions, this author produced images or whatever it may say. So you're ultimately responsible for what ends up in a paper. So in terms of who is an author, and we'll get to some more objective specific guidelines in a couple slides from now, but really it comes down to a significant or a substantial contribution to the work and what that looks like. Again, we'll get into more objective criteria. And again, you're willing to take public responsibility for that work. So if any issues come in, you should be able to back it up. Similar, you write an abstract for a conference, you go up there, you're essentially defending those data. It's no different after the paper is published, it's in the public domain, you're still responsible for defending the data if any issues arise. So in terms of that significant or substantial contribution, it does sound kind of vague, and definitions, they may vary by journal or discipline, but a widely accepted definition that we use here at UHN is provided by the ICMJE. And there's really four main criteria for authorship here. So the first is substantial contributions to the conception or design of the work. So if you were involved in, a grant that was ultimately funded to do this work, that would be considered a substantial contribution. Or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work. So are you collecting data? Are you analyzing those data? Are you involved in that part of the research life cycle? So that and drafting the work or critically revising it for important intellectual content. So if it's a conference abstract, are you drafting the abstract? If it's a manuscript, are you drafting the whole manuscript? Are you drafting, a methods section or a paragraph in the discussion? Like, these are very different contributions across the board. So really being aware of what that looks like, and are you critically revising an abstract or a manuscript before it's submitted? The third criteria, are you involved in the final approval of the version that's to be published? So oftentimes, right before a paper goes out, that paper will be circulated to all authors, and everyone has to give their okay before it's submitted for publication. And then fourth, when taking authorship, you are agreeing to be accountable for all aspects of the work. And again, if any issues arise, you should be able to defend at least your contribution to that paper. So some tips and tricks, or not tricks, but like some tips related to authorship. So being aware of authorship standards within your working discipline is very important. This will vary between humanities, biomedical science, physical sciences, etc. Sometimes you see a single author paper and you might think, like, how did this person do all of this research by themselves? Other times you'll see a paper with like 100 authors. So it really depends on your discipline. So being aware of those standards is very important. Um, Setting expectations before starting a project. Again, things change. But having those initial conversations are very important, especially with the PI. And it is difficult as a more junior member of the lab to have those conversations, but I would encourage you to do so. It's well within your right as someone that is contributing to the work. So there's no problem asking, okay, if I do XYZ, will I get authorship? There's nothing wrong with that at all. And setting those expectations early really helps. And then if things change, those channels have already been open, and it's a lot easier to revisit those discussions once they were already had. Another important one, documenting your contributions to a study. So sometimes those contributions may be lost. So making sure that whatever you're contributing to a particular paper or abstract or grant, you're personally keeping track of that so that if there's any misalignment between those early expectations that were set, the work that you did, and then the ultimate outcome of who's an author on that paper, then you'll be able to sort of have something to fall back on in defense of your contribution to the work. Again, having ongoing discussion. This is always, things are always changing, so I won't talk about that again, but just really keeping those channels of communication open. Equal treatment, so all authors, all contributors to the work should be treated equally. It doesn't matter if you're a tenured PI or if you're a first year master's student. You should all be treated equally in those discussions. And then being fair. So always granting authorship where warranted. And we'll get into what inappropriate authorship looks like. But including a trainee or paid employee, if they meet the criteria, it doesn't matter. So sometimes you'll hear things like, oh, well, you're getting paid in the summer to do this work, so I'm not giving you authorship. It really doesn't work that way. If you're fulfilling those 4 criteria, it really doesn't matter if you're getting paid or not to do that. If you do fit the criteria, you should be an author. And finally, AI use in research. So we know these tools have been around now for a couple years. They are being used, sometimes appropriately, sometimes inappropriately. There's a lot of paper mills that pretty much just produce like 100% AI papers, which is a huge problem, but that doesn't really apply to this discussion. This is more of AI as a tool and how to use it appropriately. So on one hand, AI is good, it's helpful, it can accelerate discovery, but it can introduce risks around bias, reproducibility, and hidden errors that you might not catch if you're simply like putting in a prompt and then copying and pasting whatever it spits out. And any misuse or non-disclosure of AI can really compromise the integrity of a paper once it is published. So making sure you're aware of the pitfalls of whatever you're using prior to putting it on paper, that's really important. So in terms of best practices, now again, this varies from journal to journal. So some journals are explicit in saying like you cannot use AI for any purposes. Others say you have to disclose where and when you use it. So in any event, it's best practice to clearly disclose when and how AI tools are used, again, depending on those journal guidelines, or granting agencies wherever you're submitting a piece of academic material, just be aware because they will have guidelines today since it is so widely used. probably the most important, validating any AI generated outputs before you put them in a paper. So something as simple as, I'm sure you've all done this, like a literature review, for example. When I was in grad school, these tools didn't exist, so we would have to go through dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of papers. So we knew the papers that we included in our lit review, they were legit because we actually went through them by hand. But now with these tools, a big problem is I think it's called ghost referencing or phantom or something along those lines of they'll give you references that just don't exist or that are completely unrelated to what body of literature you're reviewing. So really important to go in there and actually look at the papers that the the tool you're using is giving you. Ensuring data privacy and compliance. So again, if you're inputting sensitive human data or identifiable data, like make sure you're following institutional guidelines and you're using like a UHN approved. I know we have Copilot. I don't know what the parameters around putting sensitive information in there. It's probably not best practice to put any sort of identifiable or sensitive information into one of these tools. And then using AI or avoiding the use of AI in any ways that violate authorship norms. So obviously AI cannot be an author on an academic paper. So some tips for AI use, keeping a usage log, so documenting which tools are used for what purpose and how you verified those outputs, cross-checking your outputs, again, rerunning any analyses, even something as simple as like coming up with you're making solutions in the lab, you want to do a standard curve, chemistry is not your strong point, and you're putting all these numbers in to see your dilution and all of that fun stuff. But even verifying like mathematical equations, at least I find it's not always 100% accurate especially when we're dealing with like very micro levels of like micro numbers. So really double checking that work. And using approved tools only. So again, prioritizing like those institutionally approved platforms when working with data sets. So I will turn it over to Christine and we'll apply some of those best practices to common issues that we see related to research integrity.
Yeah, well, it's not done. Don't get too excited. No, it's a nice Friday afternoon. So Michael talked about kind of, the things we should be doing. So I'm just going to touch on some of the things that might go wrong. So first, data fabrication and falsification. So these are both bad. Fabrication is when you make up data or results that were never obtained. So, you don't have time to run an experiment, so you just make it up. You don't like the results, so you just make up something new. Not good. Falsification is similar, but it's manipulating research materials, equipment, processes, or data that you obtained to kind of make it better to you. So again, you did an experiment, you didn't really like the results, so you just kind of fudged all the numbers, changed all the numbers. Maybe you ran an experiment, you ran it in a way that's different than you were supposed to kind of bias your results so that you would get one thing versus the other. Falsifications, that's also bad. Why it matters, I think this might be kind of self-explanatory, but it undermines the credibility of the research and the researcher. You don't want to be putting out data that is not true, It can lead to retractions, damaged reputation, and public mistrust. So I would say we get like a good number of kind of cases related to fabrication and falsification in our roles. It can be, kind of data like numbers that are changed, images that are manipulated, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But But just, to kind of give a real world example, you can go and you can look this up later if you're interested. So in 2024, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, which is a cancer institute affiliated with Harvard University, faced a number of allegations of data manipulation across dozens of papers. So it was different PIs, different researchers who were kind of accused of manipulating data to make their results better. The incident highlighted some systemic issues in academic and research integrity, and this really caused kind of reputational issues for both Dana-Farber as an institute, as well as those PIs individually. Led to a number of retractions and corrections of published work, and again, it was kind of publicized in the mainstream media, so it really made it kind of broke just the science media containment bubble, and kind of led to some downstream effects there. I'm just going to skip this one for time. So kind of related is image integrity. So image integrity or issues with image integrity come up when there's images that are used that have been changed to kind of show an inaccurate or altered representation of the data. So some common issues are manipulations and duplication. So manipulations can be anything from cropping your Western blot because there's a band you don't like, to flipping a band, because you think it looks better this way. It can be adjusting the contrast of an image, so microscopy image, so it looks like something is stronger than something else when it in fact isn't, or it's amplifying a difference. And then duplication. So this is pretty common too. We see this. It's using the same image to represent different results. Sometimes this happens, completely accidentally. So this is again, to go back to what Michael was saying. What? Oh no.
Again, sorry for the little intermission. We'll continue.
Sorry about that. So back on track. I can't quite remember where I was, but I think I was talking about duplications and reusing the same image. So this can come up again, like Michael was talking about. This is why kind of file naming convention is so important, so that if this does happen, you're putting together a panel of 30 figures and your eyes glaze over and you accidentally use the same one twice. Someone catches that, you can correct it because you have properly named all your files. Okay, I'm gonna go next now. Okay, there we go. So some real world examples of this. You may be familiar with Elizabeth Bick. She's a Dutch microbiologist and she's kind of transitioned fully into being kind of an image integrity expert. She conducted a large scale review I can't remember one, but of over 20,000 biomedical papers and found that 3.8% of them contained manipulated images. So it's not, it's not all of them, it's not most of them, but it's not nothing either. Her work has resulted in over 1,300 retractions, over 200 misexpressions of concern, and over 1,000 corrections. So just to show that, there can be real kind of consequences to your publication, especially if you make an error or if there's an error or something was manipulated and there's no way to correct it. So again, to go back to that kind of importance of data management. Here's just like a kind of fun example of this. I can't remember what this paper is, but this is a panel. These are all obviously supposed to be showing different conditions. And you can see that 4 of these boxes actually come from kind of an overlapping area. So, the boxes in blue are all the same area. So you can see that they were there was a larger image and different sections were cropped to represent different conditions, which obviously cannot be true because we're all from the same image. Okay, so plagiarism, this is something we've actually seen kind of more of recently. So plagiarism is using someone else's words, ideas, or data without proper attribution. I think the thing we think of most often when we think of plagiarism is really that word, copying text from someone else, not citing them. But it does also apply to ideas. So if, you develop an idea with someone else and you don't give them proper recognition, that would be plagiarism. Using data without permission, and again, without proper recognition, that would be plagiarism. Someone makes a figure, you put it in a publication, and it's not clear that they made that figure either through authorship or otherwise, then that's plagiarism. Consequences, again, academic penalties, damaged reputations, and retractions. So some common issues that we see, and we've seen kind of through our work, poor paraphrasing or missing citations. So maybe it wasn't intentional, maybe you copied some text, you added a citation, but you used too much, it was verbatim, used it word for word, and you didn't include quotation marks. So that's plagiarism. There's also self-plagiarism, which is using your own work without proper disclosure. So, you publish something in a paper, you're kind of building off of that in the next paper, and you reuse some of that text without attributing the fact that that text, was from your initial publication. So even if it's yourself, you always just have to make sure it's very clear where the ideas, where the language, where the data is coming from. So another real world example, this was kind of interesting. So in 2024, a federal judge ruled that a professor had plagiarized large portions of an expert report. So this report was actually being used in like a legal case. And they found that large sections were copied word for word from previously published materials, and there was no citations, and they got thrown out of the legal case. So, all this work that probably, would have contributed to this case was thrown out because it was all plagiarized. So it's really important to make sure you're citing your sources. And then finally, just going to talk a little bit about authorship, which Michael talked about, kind of the ways to do it right. So we're just going to talk about some issues that can come up. So a couple kind of common issues, gift authorship. So this is when someone is listed as an author, even though they didn't contribute to the work. This could maybe be someone who's an expert in the field, and, it's done to try and bolster the credibility of the paper. But if they didn't contribute to the work, and if they're not willing to take accountability for that work, then they shouldn't be listed as an author. Ghost authorship is excluding someone who did contribute to the work. So for whatever reason, someone who left the lab and you don't want to bother reaching out to them, but they contributed a bunch of data to the paper, contributed a bunch of analysis, they need to be included or at least offered the chance to be included as an author. And then we get a lot of also disputes over order contribution levels. So this is, maybe you think you should be the first author, but someone else thinks they should be the first author and they think you should be the third author, blah, blah, blah. So I think this is where those discussions early on really help, really laying out kind of who was doing what for this publication and what kind of stuff would the first author do, what kind of stuff would the second author do, what kind of stuff would be deserving of authorship in these cases. And again, like Michael was saying, the earlier you can have these discussions, they can evolve over time, but the earlier you can have them, the better. And then finally, I'll just touch on authorship versus acknowledgement. So it's possible that people contribute to a paper, but their contributions don't quite rise to that level of authorship. So, their contribution wasn't quite significant enough as per sort of their discipline guidelines. But they still contributed. So you can acknowledge people in the acknowledgement section of a paper. This is a section that's always kind of included at the end. If you're going to acknowledge someone, it's important that that person be aware that they're being acknowledged. If you're being acknowledged, it's important that you are aware that you're being acknowledged. So depending on kind of the significance of the contribution, people might be an author or they might be acknowledged. We're going to move on to case studies, but I just want to pause quickly to see if there's any kind of questions about any of this. And I'll turn it back over to Michael for some case studies. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So Michael, do you want to do the first one?
Sure.
We have 10 minutes
So
left.
yeah, we're a bit short on time, so we might just get through one or two, but these are just fun little real life examples of issues that could arise in the lab. So for this first video here, it's related to someone who contributed to the work, paper is ready to be published, and they're now refusing themselves authorship on that paper. So
Jane, I have great news. Our paper is ready to be submitted to Nature. Really? That's nice. Is that all you have to say? This is a huge achievement for our team. You should be proud.
Look, Professor Lee, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I don't really care about this paper.
What do you mean? You collected, analyzed, and interpreted half of the data that is in this paper. You made a significant contribution to this research.
Exactly. And that's why I don't want to be listed as a co-author.
What? Why not? Let's go and discuss this in my office. Please explain to me why you don't want to be a co-author on this paper.
Because this research was poorly done and has embarrassing gaps in its findings. I think we oversold our conclusions, and that's something that I don't want to be a part of.
How can you say that? This research is groundbreaking. It advances our understanding of the complex dynamics of neural networks.
Please, spare me the academic jargon. This research is poorly done and useless. It doesn't solve any problems. It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't make any difference.
I can't believe what I'm hearing. You are throwing away your career over this.
No, I'm saving my career from this. I don't want to waste my time and talent on something that isn't worthy of publishing. I want to do something meaningful with my data skills.
Really? Like what?
Like, I don't know, maybe join a startup that uses data to improve people's lives. Or work for an NGO that uses data to fight social injustice. Or create my own project that uses data to change the world.
You're dreaming, Jane. You're naive and idealistic. You don't know how hard it is out there. You need credentials and reputation to succeed in this field. And this paper is your ticket to both.
No thanks. I don't need your paper or your approval or your advice. I know what I want and what I can do.
Jane, please don't leave. You're making a big mistake.
All right, so a little theatrical, but we have a case here where Jane collected, analyzed, and interpreted half of the data in the paper, but does not want to be listed as a co-author. And Professor Lee still wants to publish the paper. So, is it okay to publish the paper anyway? If so, how should Jane's contributions be recorded? So, what do you guys think?
Is there a way to like mention as an author but anonymously? Because I was just thinking that would be an option for her.
Yeah, so there is definitely an avenue to anonymously attribute those contributions to someone in the case where this person doesn't want to be a named author in the paper. So in terms of that, yeah, if they ultimately do want to publish the paper, that's an option. Is it okay to publish the paper and put her on as an author?
So he said no, she doesn't want to be involved. I don't see why FBI would or should be able to override that just for fun.
Exactly. So she fully has the right to refuse authorship, even if she contributed a large portion of the data that's in the paper. Now, what about the other authors on the paper? So the other half of the data they were responsible for, but this large chunk is really now kind of in limbo. It's still in the paper, but it's not directly attributable to anyone else. So those other co-authors, they need to be confident that that work that Jane carried out is reproducible and valid prior to publication, because as authors, they're now bearing responsibility for those data that are in the paper. So, yeah, not okay to publish with her as an author, but there are ways around that ultimately to make sure that that work, that is valuable work, in the opinion of the PI at least, gets published if it is valid, reproducible, and the authors are willing to stand behind that work. I think we have time for no?
Oh,
Yeah, okay. Oh, and that's what we just all said. So here's one other quick one.
Hey, Aisha. I have some good news. The paper we worked on with Professor Smith has been accepted for publication in the Journal of Applied Physics. Really? That's great, Sabrina. Congratulations. Thanks. You too. You did a lot of work on the data analysis and the figures. Yeah, I did. So, where's my name on the paper? Well, actually, Aisha, you're not on the paper. What? What do you mean I'm not on the paper? I'm sorry, Aisha. Professor Smith decided to put only me as the co-author. He said you didn't contribute enough to the writing and the interpretation of the results. Sabrina, that's ridiculous. I spent hours and hours on this project.
I wrote most of the methods section and half of the results section. I also helped you with the literature review and the discussion. How can you say I didn't contribute enough?
I don't know, I shall. He's the boss. He makes the final decision.
That's not fair. That's unethical. He's stealing my work and giving you credit for it. You didn't even do anything.
Hey, that's not true. I did a lot of work too. I designed and performed the experiments. I wrote the introduction and the conclusion. I also revised and edited the whole manuscript.
So what? That doesn't mean you deserve to be the only co-author. We should both be on the paper. This is plagiarism.
No, it's not plagiarism. It's an authorship dispute. And it's not up to us to decide. It's up to Professor Smith.
Well, then I'm going to talk to Professor Smith and tell him how I feel. This is unacceptable.
Okay, fine. Go ahead. But don't expect him to change his mind. He's very stubborn.
We'll see about that, Sabrina. This is not over.
Okay, so we have a dispute between two graduate students. So Sabrina and Aisha, they both think they should be authors on this paper. So Sabrina was named as an author, but Aisha believes that she did a lot of the work as well, and she should have also been an author. So there's clearly a dispute here. Who should make the decision regarding who's ultimately included as an author in this case? Should anyone make a decision on that? Raise your hand if you think yes. That's good. Oh, one hand. Who should make the decision?
If someone would, anyone should make a decision. Someone should.
So in these cases, it's a bit of a trick question here. No one should really dictate who is and isn't an author. Like after the work is done and all the contributions are in and everything is clearly defined as to who did what. The best way to resolve these disputes really is to go back to those criteria and look at those four to see who ultimately satisfied those four criteria. And if you did, then you should be an author. And again, it's important to sit down as a group and have a discussion about those contributions. And this goes all the way back to all of those important practices that we touched on. So things like data management, record keeping, making sure you're keeping an accurate tab on what you contributed to a paper, especially. That way you can go back and say, look, I fulfilled these criteria. I should be an author. And, if the PI or whomever is getting in the way of that, there are avenues through either our office or whatever research institute you're working at through those channels to dispute that. And so long as you have a case that is backed up by your contributions and those contributions fulfill those criteria, then there are ways to rectify that. So ultimately, the decision for authorship is not up to any one individual. It's really about fulfilling those criteria. And I think that's it.
Wonderful. So that brings us to the end of our session. So as always, we do have a quick feedback poll that we'd love for you to complete, just rating the session on a scale of 0 to 10. So we do have another session that's coming up in I believe it's 2 weeks from now, the 26th. So again, it'll be in the same space, and we'll be focusing on doing a little bit of networking and learning how to network, some different skills, building a LinkedIn profile. We'll walk through all of those different steps. Once I see phones going down, I'll just flip to the next slide, which has the link to the attendance form for those of you who joined maybe a little bit late. You can complete that attendance form. We also have some paper ones at the front if you would prefer filling those ones out. We also have a bag of lanyards here. If you did not receive one during the first session or you lost the one from the first session, we have a few extras lying around. So if you need one, just come see us at the end. Thank you to Christine and Michael for this wonderful presentation. And if you've already completed the attendance form, then you're free to go.